And we are live. I'm Mitch Jackson. This is Human.Social. I love bringing guests onto the show that are disrupting industries, creating positive change around the world. And these two gentlemen happen to be childhood friends. It's really good to see you, Tom Martin and Pete Brown. How's life, you guys? It's only been like 40 plus years, right?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Gosh.
Too long.
But lots of stories, lots of memories. And one of the things that just jumped out at me that I wanted to talk to you guys about is you guys spent, 29 days, I've got it written down here, 29 days and 278 miles taking a Thule reed raft down the Colorado River. What in the world sparked this idea? Why did you guys decide to do this? And tell us a little bit about the experience.
Thanks, Mitch. Maybe the thing to do here is to run a little presentation that Pete's put together, which answers all these questions and talks about the journey. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea, Pete. We'll do that. But before we do that, I didn't ask you guys to introduce yourselves. And so, Tom, why don't we start with you? In addition to being my old hang gliding buddy back in the day, and I don't know how you and I are still alive. That's another show for another time. Tell everybody, Tom, a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
Well, my name is Tom Martin. I'm a physical therapist. I volunteer for a group called River Runners for Wilderness. I write books about the history of river running. I write guidebooks about river running, and just a researcher of history now. So it's great to be here.
Yeah.
Pete.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Mitch, for the invitation. For definitely, like you say, old friends. And everyone. I have photographs. I was gonna throw some in. Mitch rappelling down in old mine shafts, and this was some of the stuff we did when we were kids. 18-year-olds.
Don't try this at home, right, folks?
Don't try it at home. So this is kind of, we're just continuing the adventure here, Mitch. It's a continuation. But
I love it. We're just getting started. So what are you doing now, Pete? What do you do for a living?
Well, so I'm actually a dendrochronologist. I've got a tree ring researcher. I've got a PhD in forest sciences from Colorado State University, and affiliate faculty. I teach forest ecology and fire ecology, and just do tree ring research, mainly for Park Service, Forest Service. A lot of our research is looking at climate change impacts on fire and how that has changed through time.
And I'll tell you what, that doesn't surprise me. I remember all the things you used to be interested in back in the day, back in high school, the backpacking trips. We took a backpacking trip together to the bottom of the Grand Canyon in the snow. Do you guys remember that? And I remember at the was Tom there?
I don't think Tom was there. No, I don't think Tom was.
I remember.
I just read a story the other day about climbing Baboquivari, and down in southern Arizona, and I remember the time we climbed Baboquivari, and you got frostbite just about because you were the only one. It was ice on the rock in the climb.
Oh my goodness! Anyway. Lots of good memories, but I do remember backpacking in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and we came up and spent the night at the Grand Canyon Lodge, and all of us were named Pete Brown. Remember that?
We only had enough money for one person, so I somehow got elected to rent the room.
You did.
Back door.
We can say that now because I've got everybody's back covered from a legal perspective, so no worries. The statute of limitations run on that one.
Yeah, I'm sure that's 40 years ago.
Yeah, that was fun though. It was a trip I still remember today. There's something special about the Grand Canyon. Tom, I can see why you still live in the area, and Pete, I can absolutely understand why you guys decided to do this trip. So let's dive right in. Talk a little bit about what sparked the idea of building what is a Thule raft, and what sparked the idea, Tom, to do this project.
Shall we go ahead and get started on some stuff?
Yeah, let's do the screen share because that's all the answers right there.
Let's give it a try.
All right, so you guys can see that, right?
Yes, we can.
All right. So there's the boat. Tom, take it away.
So Pete, do you want to go ahead and turn that PowerPoint on?
Oh, can you not see it?
I see the slide, and I see your side slides and all the PowerPoint features.
So just click slideshow. and from the beginning. There you go.
Is that it?
Well,
Are you seeing it?
we can see the slide, but we're also seeing the display on the left, which is fine. What's more important in the slides is your story. So just walk us through it, and we'll just click through one slide at a time. No big deal.
Okay. I don't know what's going on because all I'm seeing is the slideshow. But anyway.
Okay. Well, this is the Grand Canyon, a little map of the Grand Canyon. And off on the far right is Lee's Ferry at River Mile 0. And on the far left is Lake Mead, the reservoir behind Hoover Dam, and Pierce Ferry 280 miles later. So this is kind of the layout of the Grand Canyon. As you can see, it crosses most of the state of Arizona, going from the east to the west. On the east, it's bounded by Glen Canyon Dam and Lake Powell. Now on the west, out by Las Vegas. So that's kind of the lay of the land. I've been interested in Grand Canyon for a long time, and Pete, maybe pop the next slide there.
Well, Tom, let me just jump in here just to say that, if anyone, if you ever have a chance to do this trip, definitely, there's commercial trips, but there's also these private trips that Tom's been heavily involved in over the past few years in his organization, River Runners for Wilderness. But you can do this, but it's good to take anywhere close to a month, 3 weeks to a month to do this.
And let me point out that over on Amazon Live, we have people watching today's show, you guys, on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, different Facebook pages and groups. We are pushing over to Amazon Live, and Tom Martin's books are displayed either to the left or below the video, everyone. So you'll be able to pick up books about hiking the Grand Canyon, rafting the Grand Canyon. Tom's written a couple of books that talk about the history and some of the issues with the Grand Canyon. So they're all right there. We also want to encourage comments and questions. If you guys have questions, DM me, text me, ask me through the platform you're watching this on, and I will bring your questions up and we can share them with Tom and Pete. Didn't mean to interrupt you guys, but please continue.
Let's go to the next image, Pete.
Can you see that, Tom? I switched it.
Yeah, so you're going to want to move your mouse and click on the next image below. I think for some reason you're not streaming in.
There you go.
Now go back a couple. One more up.
Oh, that's
it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks, Mitch, for mentioning some of the books that I've had a chance to write. A lot of books for river runners on the sections of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon and the Canyonlands section, that's Cataract and Meander, Labyrinth, Stillwater Canyons, the San Juan River. Then we jump the Basin entirely and go off to the Mississippi for the Arkansas River. Just a bunch of really fun books that help river runners understand where they're headed, where they're going. The history books are really fun as well. And it's this history that got me kind of going on this whole thing. I'm going to go a little bit now, talk just briefly about some of the major historical points of the Grand Canyon and boating. Click the next picture, Pete. So this is a photo actually from 1871 of the John Wesley Powell's second expedition. Only the first expedition from 1869 went all the way through the Grand Canyon. It is the first documented journey through the canyon. There were at least 2 other people that claimed they went through the Grand Canyon on log rafts. Okay, so that's the history. That's what we know. Go ahead, next image, Pete. So I'm always looking for the firsts, and here's the first and oldest image I can find of women rowing a boat. This is actually at Lee's Ferry, where we started our trip this winter, and that's Catherine Paul and Edith Kolb there. on one of the boats used by the USGS surveyors to map the canyon in 1923. Now, most people go through Grand Canyon. Next picture, Pete. They are on rubber boats, and the first rubber boat came to Grand Canyon in 1938. The boat was named Charlie, and the guy that wrote it was a fellow named Amos Berg. Today, next picture, Pete. These huge motorized tour boats make their way through the Grand Canyon. It's not that terrifying. The guy in the back, the guy in the back has a motor back there, and he has cranked that boat, and he has aimed it for that big hole to give his passengers a ride. The rest of us go around that thing because we're like, not interested in that. Next picture, Pete. This is the same rapid, and it's my wife running a boat there. That's Hazel Clark, and this is what we do, my friends and family. We boat ourselves. We're do-it-yourself people, just like you take your own bike ride or you take your own backpack. That's what we do. So, next picture. I assumed, like the guy in the front here, I know all this history stuff, and yet the woman in the back reminded me with that look she has, dude, you don't know the half of it. And she's right. So I started looking back at who could be the first mariners of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Next image. And right away, the people, Amakav and the Kokopah and the Mojave and the Gila Indians, the indigenous peoples of the basin of the Colorado River, all had these little reed rafts, these rafts made out of plants. And the Spaniards in the 1540s called the Colorado River El Rio de las Balsas, the river of little boats. And I was like, wow, that's kind of neat. Next picture, Pete.
Tom, how much earlier was that from when Powell went down the river?
Well, this was in 1540 and Powell was in 1869. So we're 300 years earlier. But the indigenous peoples had been boating for thousands of years in the historic record. Thousands of years. We think today we're all special with our stand-up paddle boards. No, the indigenous people, they created that stand-up paddleboard concept.
What are we looking at? What's that picture we're looking at right there?
This is a Seri Indian down in the Sea of Cortez standing on a Thule reed raft, just like you stand on a paddleboard today. Wow. These are great platforms to fish off of, and that's what the indigenous peoples did. They would build these things in the spring, use them all summer, and then repurpose them in the fall. Next picture, Pete. So I started, I'm like, all right, what else is in the historic record that talks about these watercraft in use?
Well, and I just like to point out that there's, a record, these Thule rafts, there's lots of understanding of the California, a number of the California tribes all over the Bay Area. They were using these Thule rafts all the way down to Peru. So, and this is there's a long history of these things. So.
And I love this one. When I found this, this is a little artist rendition of Whipple, the Whipple expedition crossing the Colorado in the winter of 1853-54. The artist was Bobby Mulhausen, who had a wonderful sense of humor that described the terrible time they had getting across the Colorado River in this very awkward boat, which at one point tipped over completely and all their supplies dumped in the river. And the Mojave, check this out, who had their flexible rafts that they could steer, went round and round and picked up all the supplies. And it was his conclusion that they should have hired the Mojave in the first place, which a lot of people did. So the more you kind of dig into this stuff, you realize that the indigenous peoples of the Colorado River were excellent mariners. And then this happened. So I'm going through these letters. I'm trying to work on another book project. And I ran across this letter from the 1950s that said, up in Nankoweap, now this is in Marble Canyon, it's in Upper Grand Canyon, a very special ruin that he had been told about is supposed to contain a boat made of some kind of rushes. This is it just blew me away because wait a minute, here is actually mention of a boat made of plant material in the Grand Canyon. And I was like, whoa. And then
was this the first time you ever thought about possibly someone else navigating the river before Powell? Or had it already crossed your mind? You just had never seen any evidence that might support that?
No, I stumbled upon this letter and I was like, wow, this is really neat. And now go back to the share again. So the next thing that happened was these permits to do it yourself rafting through Grand Canyon are really hard to get. And I got this email, you got to play a lottery. There's thousands of people competing for these permits. I got an email from the Park Service that said I had won the lottery. I fainted. So it's like, wait a minute, I've got a permit now to run the Grand Canyon. What would it take to build a little raft out of grass and take it through the Grand Canyon? So the next thing I know, next picture, my hard-suffering wife and I are up to our knees in mud out at Blythe, Arizona. And this is Thule. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'6", and I'm reaching up as high as I can. And you can see the Thule is growing from my feet way up in the air, quite a ways above me. This stuff is good 12 feet long. And the neat thing is, if you cut it at the bottom, you can hold it out straight and you can tickle somebody 12 feet away. And so I thought, wow, what a great way. If someone's taking a nap, you could really be way away from them and you could tickle their ear and then run away. This Thule is amazing stuff. That's the Thule right there where I was cutting it off as I had my poor wife's kitchen knife tied to my wrist so I didn't lose it. This stuff is really amazing. It has parenchyma in it, which I learned from Pete, are chambers, little cells of air that go from the top of the plant to the bottom to bring air to the plant's roots so they don't rot. And that's what makes this stuff buoyant. If you look at the diameter of your thumb, that's about the diameter of this stuff at the ground. And if you cut it off at the ground, it grows back, which is really neat. So we hacked up a bunch of this stuff and tied it to the truck and drove it back to Flagstaff. We were running out of time now. I didn't start this project until a little late in the game. So we laid it all out on the back porch in Flagstaff. Now we live at 7,000 feet and it's in the fall now of 2020. And every day I would bundle this stuff up and take it to a friend's garage at night. And in the morning, I would zip it back out to the back of our house to lay it out in the sun. And I did that for a couple of weeks. And then, next picture, a friend of ours named Stacy Davenport lives in Prescott. And she and Hazel Clark and I, we bundled this stuff all up in 3 big bundles and tied the bundles together. And the next picture is what the finished project looked like. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. And the indigenous peoples of the coast that still make these watercraft, they're beautiful. And this is a big whisk broom, which I can sweep up the sweepings around the beautiful craft that the indigenous people make. This is a really poor excuse for a boat. but it's all we had. Now, people have asked me, why did you get Pete Brown to run this thing? Well, the next picture shows another boat that I built. That
Wait, Tom. Before we leave this one, you got to. Tom christened this boat the Lots of Knots because it's got lots of knots. And I like it that Tom at one point says that, this is way more bundles, more ties than you'll see on some of the native craft. We've got some photos of those, but this one's Grand Canyon bound. So to make sure it stays together.
And we didn't know what we were doing. So this is another little boat, a historic replica that I built. And I love driving this little boat. And I wasn't going to miss the chance of taking it through the Grand Canyon again. So then I really did need somebody to run Lots of Knots. And I asked Pete, would this be something you'd be interested in doing? Because, I've known Pete since we were children. And when Pete sets his mind to something, he does it. I mean, he'll die trying. He will do it. So when Pete said yes,
and you were okay with that, Tom?
I just relaxed. I'm like, Pete will do it. If it can be done, he will do it. At least he will attempt it with the last breath that he's got.
Well,
so next,
let me just throw in there. When we were kids, and climbing and going in old mine shafts and stuff in southern Arizona, and I would let either Tom or Mitch go first because, so there you go.
And we did. We did.
You did it. And then I'd follow you after that. But
interesting. I always let Tom go too. Oh, that's awesome. I love this, you guys. So many memories. So, and Tom, earlier you showed another boat. You built that boat also? Amazing.
Yeah, I wrote a book about that boat called Big Water Little Boats. This is the first dory to come to Grand Canyon, and I can talk a whole presentation about that.
Okay.
But this is why I wanted to row this boat. I'm in love with many boats. So
fantastic. I was just curious, how many boats have you built over the years?
Only two.
Only two. Okay, gotcha. And we're looking at both of them. I love it. And listen, if you guys have questions, go ahead and ask. I've got a few questions that we're going to save towards the end, or I'll interject them when appropriate because we haven't gotten to certain points of the story yet. And also over on Amazon, yes, let me answer a question. You can click and purchase Tom's books over on Amazon Live, you guys. So feel free to do that. I'm sure you'd appreciate it. Sorry about that, guys. Please continue.
Thanks, Mitch. So this is a group of 16 people, a bunch of friends of ours, people we've known for a long time. And this is in the height of COVID. It's December of 2020. We're all masked up. One of the people on the trip has a lady friend in Europe. And at that time, you could buy rapid tests. And so we bought 20 rapid tests. And on day 4, we all stuck this thing way up our nose. And we were all negative, so we dropped our masks, and we were a pod then. Next picture, Pete. So these river trips start at Lee's Ferry, and it's just mayhem. You roll up and you disgorge these trucks full of gear because we have to bring 30 days worth of food for 16 people. We have to carry out our solid waste for 30 days for 16 people. And we had to put a little Thule boat together. There were a couple of things that we waited for to the very end. And the last thing we wanted to do at Lee's Ferry was put a couple of dowels, wooden dowels, through the Thule reeds. This was traditionally done by the indigenous peoples to strengthen the craft a little bit. So we used a hammer and a 3/4 inch wooden dowel, and we just drove the thing through the bundles in a couple places. And the next thing I know, I'm out rigging boats and running around. The next thing I know, I look up and I'm like, there's Pete. And he's out in the river with his life jacket and his little Kmart paddle, and there he is.
Figuring it out.
So Pete, take it away.
Well, at this point, there were two questions. We didn't know if it was even going to float, so that answered that question. And then second one was, would it move through the water at all? And it did. It was just fine, even with the little cheap-ass Kmart paddle. So we were able to sail it around right there. The next issue we had is there is a ranger, so this is all Park Service, National Park Service, and there's a river ranger who approves all of the gear that you take down, including your personal flotation devices and medical gear and repair kits for the boats and all these things. And so she was looking at this Thule raft, and even though she knows Tom really well, and she knows Tom would not do anything stupid whatsoever, she was questioning whether this boat was actually going to do it. So, and of course, we were all questioning whether it was going to do more than 20 miles. The other question, of course, was we hit the first rapid, and it's just going to fall apart. But at least it floated. It was maneuverable. So the next morning, this was all one afternoon, we camped right there, and then the next day there's a safety talk actually from her, and she approved it. So bingo, we're on our way. We also Tom had recruited a safety kayaker, Fiona Gormley. So we did have someone who was going to kind of follow me along, just to make sure that I didn't get out of the water too much or fall off and get lost or something like that. I was wearing a dry suit, of course, had a PFD. One other thing just to mention in terms of, so this is just one of the camps. You can see the boats all lined up there. And then every evening we would actually pull the Thule out of the water. The other thing the one thing that I thought would really happen was that it would get waterlogged, that after a certain number of miles down the river, it would just not float anymore and we couldn't move it through the water. But pulling it out of the water every evening, leaning it up like that. And by the way, this is the way the there's Peruvian fishermen that have used Thule boats, and they pull them out of the water every night and stand them up on end like this. They drain pretty well. It would take 4 of us to haul this thing out of the water in the evening, when we got to camp. And then the next morning, I could usually drag it back to the water by myself. One other modification that we did, this is pretty much exactly the boat that Tom and Hazel and Stacy had built, except for the dowels. And then we also found after the first day or two that I was kind of smashing down, sitting on that middle bundle. I was smashing that down. So we found this piece of driftwood, and Tom strapped it on to the boat, and then the seat, I had a little blow-up seat with a backrest. Of course, the indigenous people would kneel on it the entire way down the river. My knees wouldn't take that. So I had a nice little blow-up seat, little backrest, and then this board distributed the weight better. Just a close-up of what the ends look like. This is after a few days, and the Thule would get pretty soggy, but then it would drain. We'd also have some layover days where we'd actually do some hikes. That's one of the great things about a canyon trip is the side hikes. I mean, you're in the Grand Canyon. They don't call it the Grand Canyon for nothing. And so that was really nice. And after a day in the sun, I'd come back to the Thule and it would have that grass smell to it. It was really gorgeous. And I had the best smelling boat in the canyon.
Hey, Pete, let me jump in real quick and just reset the show. We have some people joining late messaging me. Hey, Mitch, what exactly are we watching? And that's a good question, right? For someone that didn't live this for 29 days, 200, almost 300 miles. So my childhood friends, who I haven't seen in about 40 years, Tom Martin and Pete Brown, are sharing their trip in a reed boat, a Thule reed boat down the Grand Canyon. Basically, and they'll tell you why towards the end of the show, maybe some findings, some new theories that they may have as to who were the first people actually traveling down the Grand Canyon. But that's what we're watching. And Pete, down at the bottom, Pete Brown was the quote unquote wind dummy and with no kayaking experience, you guys decided that, he's going to be the guy that's on the boat, which is just awesome. And then Tom and his wife Hazel, another friend, I guess, built the boat. And that's what we're doing. Pete's now walking us through this adventure. This is recorded, everyone. You can watch this. If you missed the beginning of the show, you can watch this at your convenience, right where you're watching it now, except it's going to be recorded. And then we will be answering all of your questions towards the end of the show. So, Pete, back to you, my friend.
Yeah, as Mitch says, I was just the guinea pig. It was all Tom Martin tried to pick this. So. And I just threw in. So I'm trying to be a professional photographer in my old age here too.
It's beautiful, beautiful,
yeah, gorgeous. And
gorgeous.
Like I just mentioned this. If any of you ever have an opportunity to do a Grand Canyon rafting trip, jump on it if at all possible. It's just an incredible experience.
Well, can we still do that? Is that something we can sign up to do with a professional guide, or is there a 10-year wait?
Yeah,
What's the process with that?
Well, there's commercial trips, obviously, every summer, and you can pay the money to do that, or you can, find a good friend like Tom Martin who goes on a trip. You can only do one trip per year. Everybody is limited to one trip per year, except for commercial guides. And but it's just wonderful, and spend 3 weeks to a month down in the Grand Canyon.
Okay.
And just
awesome.
wonderful. So anyway, we get views like this. You can see me there in the middle. All the boats. We try to stay together. Here's another view. Just most of the canyon is actually flat water. And again, one of the tricks on the boat was actually to be able to keep up with the other rafts, the rubber rafts. These are 18-foot kind of standard rafts. They carry a ton of gear. It's amazing. I mean, this is like truck camping. You can pretty much carry whatever you want to.
How fast is the water moving, Pete? Right there.
Well, the average speed is like 4 miles per hour, but right here, okay. There's a current, but typically, you're doing a little rowing as well, or paddling in my case. And then in the evening, we find these gorgeous little camp spots and set up camp. And, it's living in a tent and taking cold baths in the river, but otherwise it's just a really wonderful
Looks amazing.
experience. So at River Mile 88, if you remember the map back there, we stopped at Phantom Ranch. And Phantom Ranch, of course, is the only civilized place in the middle of the Grand Canyon. It's a hike down to get to there, obviously. Tom walked up and found one of the rangers up there. Notice everybody's mask. Again, this is in January. It's past January. And he came down and took a picture of the Thule Reed boat. We wanted to make sure that this got back to the river ranger at Lee's Ferry and let her know that we'd made it that far. We really didn't think it was going to get this far. None of us, I don't think. We thought it was going to either get destroyed in the rapids, or it was going to get waterlogged, or the beavers were going to eat it, or something. So, Tom just, wanted to point out that, so in this picture, you notice the Black Bridge. There's two bridges right here at Phantom Ranch, and one's called the Black Bridge, the other one's the Silver Bridge. But the Black Bridge, here's the Black Bridge right there. So there's the beach we were just on, and right above us is this ruin. And there were lots of indigenous people. There's a long history, as Tom mentioned. There's thousands of years of history of occupation in the Grand Canyon. And the Colorado River always would have been a barrier to either travel up and down the canyon or just getting across the canyon. I mean, right here, you could probably see your neighbors across the way and wave to them. But if you didn't have some means of getting over there, that's a fairly big river to get across.
What are we looking at here? Do you know what we're looking at as far as the ruins?
These are all Anasazi ruins, the ancestral Puebloan ruins. So I think this site was occupied probably, around 1000 AD or so, 1000 to 1100, I believe, is the dating on it.
Wow.
So,
This is called the Bright Angel Pueblo. And there's a kiva in the center we're looking at, and a number of structures lined up next to it. So, we think about boating in Grand Canyon. Well, indigenous peoples were all along the river throughout the entire canyon. Every few miles, there is a uh, structures from indigenous peoples. So again, you think, gee, they're throughout the canyon. Why wouldn't they be boating, especially when there is material like Thule native to the Grand Canyon and upstream and downstream? So I was sort of standing there next to the ranger and Pete, and I was just like, I can't believe that we're here, and I can't believe that I'm looking at the Bright Angel Pueblo. This is just like this synchronicity of proof of concept. I was just blown away, and I want to add that we were pretty concerned about Pete with Fiona, kind of keeping an eye on him. By the time we got to Phantom Ranch, I wasn't concerned about Pete anymore. I was concerned that this boat might just make it through Grand Canyon, and we need to save the boat.
How many times, Tom and Pete, how many times have you guys made this trip in traditional rafts, traditional boats?
This is it. This is it. Yeah. This was the first time anybody's done it.
Well, no, I thought, Tom, you've been down the river a few times.
Yes, I've been down the river a few times, and I've built, another historic replica, and taken it through the canyon. But as Pete said, this is the first documented Thule Reed watercraft to transit the Grand Canyon.
I meant in a traditional raft.
Oh,
you've been down the river quite a few times in a traditional raft, haven't you?
Yes.
Give me an idea. I'm just curious. I've got a question here. How many times has Tom been down the river? I don't know what the answer is. That's why I'm asking.
More than I am old. See the gray hair?
Really, that many times? Wow.
But that question is kind of misleading, because if I ask a taxi driver in Washington, D.C., what's on the ceiling of the National Geographic building, if you walk into the National Geographic building, just into their foyer at the front, what's on the ceiling? If you ask a taxi driver in D.C. who's driven that city for decades, they won't know that there's a relief map of Grand Canyon upside down on the ceiling there.
Wow.
So asking the question how many times is very misleading, because 1.1 million acres, that's Grand Canyon. And the river's only like 3,000 acres. So you can miss an awful lot on the river, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and can I throw in here too, Mitch, that Tom is a real expert on the canyon. He's only one of about, I think, maybe 25 people that have hiked the entire length of the Grand Canyon at some point. So
it's over 40 now, Pete.
Okay, well, sorry.
The number's going up.
But you were like, what, number 12 or something? I can't remember. But
which doesn't surprise me. I remember Tom always, Tom, because you were so tall and you had such long legs, you always were able to out hike all of us. You were like the ever ready bunny rabbit before there was an ever ready bunny rabbit. You remember that, Pete? He just never stopped.
Never.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to point out that Tom Martin is a Grand Canyon expert, and so not just on the river.
Lots of nuts.
Yeah. Anyway, so and again, it's the side hikes. I mean, there's these slot canyons, and there's just absolutely, the river is gorgeous, but it's the side canyons, and this is one nice thing about taking 29 days to go through the Grand Canyon is you have so many opportunities to stop and do a layover day where we spend 2 nights at a single camp, and then the day we get to do a nice hike up some slot canyon. So anyway, we're pushing on down the river, and by like I say, day 2, I thought the raft was going to make it. There's a big, one of the first giant rapids to hit is House Rock Rapid, and I fell off of the boat, held onto the boat, and it just smashed me to bits, and the boat stayed together. So if the boat survived that and I survived it, I thought there's no way, nothing's going to stop us now. Just here's another camp. This is Bass Camp, and just to show you, I mean, it's just incredible. just a gorgeous spot.
It really is.
So I just thought, well, so everybody probably is thinking about the rapids. The Grand Canyon is, extremely well known for its rapids. It's just some incredible whitewater. And, it's a lot of fun. Of course, that's what a lot of folks really focus on when they go. And again, it's everything. It's the whole trip. It's the people. It's the side hikes and so on. So this is me going into Hance Rapid in the wrong position. You're supposed to be over to the left of where I'm coming in. So I got knocked off on this one. Here's another picture. If you can just barely see me down in there. Here's my safety kayaker. She gave up on me when she saw me going in the wrong place. So
hey Pete, let me ask you to do something. I want to experiment because I want everyone to be able to see this. Do you have up above you, it says from current slide? From current slide. Can you click that? I'm just curious to see if that will just fill up the entire picture, and it does not. So we're good. All right, let's just go ahead and continue. We're good.
I'm sorry, Mitch.
So is that you floating down in the bottom of the rapids right there?
Yep, right there.
That's you right there.
So here's another big raft, one of our big rafts. That's me right there, if you can see me.
Wow. Wow.
He's about ready to go for a swim there, Mitch.
Somewhere.
That's what it looks like to me. Were you scared at all, Pete? Was this dangerous, or was this something that you felt like you could handle?
It was a lot of fun, Mitch. It was just falling off the raft and but I was held onto the raft. That's the one big thing is there was never I only let go of the raft one time. As Tom mentioned, after a while it did get to be the point where we wanted to just make sure that the raft survived. I mean, since it had come so far, every time we go another 10 miles, and it was like, okay, we got to go the rest of the way. And
hey Pete, we have a question. How long did it take you, if you don't mind, how long did it take you to get comfortable on the raft if you haven't kayaked before?
Probably a day. I mean, it was okay. I first started out trying to balance on the raft using what are called thigh straps. And I gave up on that really quickly. And actually, I found the way to ride the raft was just to drop my legs on both sides and ride it like a horse, basically, just to straddle it. And that really gave me a lot of control of the balance and the, being able to push off with my paddle or high side if it was starting to go over. But I did swim a lot. So, and I've got a couple of videos here just to show you guys. And just to give you a little context, this is actually coming into Lava Rapid, and Lava is, one of the biggest and the baddest rapids on the river. I think there's a couple other ones, but these are a couple of kayakers that actually went through just before us, and it's this big hole right here that you want to miss. That flips 18-foot rafts, the big rafts. Fully loaded. I mean, these things weigh close to a ton and a half, and it'll still flip them. So here's another one of the kayakers. This is a little video, and I hope this is going to play. This is actually Tom going through in the gym in his boat. So just to give you a little idea of some of the, and of course I kind of miss it, but.
That's amazing. Tom, what's the secret to making it through the rapids in one piece? For those of us that haven't had the opportunity to do that, is there a trick to it, or you just hang on tight and paddle hard?
For this rapid, it's all about being in the right place. Yeah. If you're in the wrong place, it's not going to go well. If you're in the right place, just keep your boat pointed downstream and keep paddling, and you're good. And I was lucky. Yeah, you just got your little oars and you just keep rowing. And so Mitch, when you stand before a judge and you plead your case, I look at that and I go, Mitch, how do you do that? That's, you're a successful lawyer. How do you do that? So you're asking me a question of something that I'm very comfortable with, and I'm asking you right back. Well, you're very comfortable in what you do. That's how this works. And you didn't just show up. You went to law school. You practiced. You're very good at what you do. So that's how this works.
Well, and if anybody, get on YouTube. There's a million videos. Google or search for Grand Canyon Lava Rapid, and you'll find a ton of videos on it. You know, people both successful runs and some not so successful runs. So
let me point out in the description, wherever you're watching this on the internet, everyone, in the description, there's a link to a video that I believe Tom produced. I'm not sure. And it looks like it's taken from this angle that we're looking at right here, but it's the start to finish of the trip. And it's just a fascinating video. So I invite everyone to watch that video after today's show, not now.
Well, here's a little taste for folks. I mean, this one's in there too. This was one Mitch played at the very beginning here, but this is me going through Lava Rapid on the raft on the Thule. And you can see there's the safety kayaker ahead of me. I had another kayaker. We actually had another fellow who was riding his kayak as well.
What?
And this is actually called the right run, the bubble line run. Following this little bubble line, going to the right of that big hole that I mentioned. But there's still some pretty big waves in there. And so, yeah, about this point, I'm starting to get a little worried. And then I get through that wave, and it's like, oh, yeah, I got this. No problem at all. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. Now I'm off the raft. But I'm still holding on to the raft. And then there's still a couple more waves to go through, big waves. And then the big thing on this one is I need to get back on the raft because I need to pull into the beach down at the bottom. Otherwise, the raft is going to keep on going, and we're going to miss a spot where we need to take out. We need to stop. So,
were you using a GoPro, Pete? Is that what you were shooting the video with?
GoPro. So, and I'll stop it right there. But you know, there's a longer. It didn't take much to climb back on. It was pretty easy, really. So
that
anyway,
to me is just phenomenal. I mean, this is lava falls. Pete you should know, Pete just got smeared right off this raft. And what did he do? He hung on to it, and then he crawled right back on it and got his paddle and kept going. I'm like, bravo, Pete.
Yeah, good job, Pete.
Tom tells me that the old timers tell him if you're paddling by the time you get back to the tail waves, then it's a successful run. So
if you're paddling on your boat in the end of the rapid, it's a good run. And Pete he was paddling at the end of every rapid. So that's a good run all the way through.
Pretty much. I guess. Wish I hadn't fallen off on some, and I know it was dumb, but.
Is that snow up on the mountains, you guys?
Yeah, we had a little bit of weather.
Wow.
Sort of towards the end of the trip.
I'm going to jump in here and say, Pete's been showing some really gorgeous pictures. What you can't see in the photographs is how cold it is in December and January until the front comes through and you can see some snow up there. So just think about camping for 30 days in weather where it can snow. I just want you to keep that in mind here for winter boating.
Yeah. Wow.
But the other advantage of the winter is we saw like 6 other groups the entire trip. And we had the canyon to ourselves. I mean, the entire Grand Canyon. It was, anyway.
Awesome.
So here's right at almost at the very end of the river. All of the sediment you can see over there on the bank is actually from Lake Mead. At one point, this was all underwater at Lake Mead, but probably if most of you are aware, you know, Lake Mead's at one of its lowest points has been in the last 70 or 80 years. But anyway, so here it's still a river now. And I just wanted to show you, this is almost to the very end of the canyon. This is after 28 days, 29 days at this point, on the water, not every day on the water, but every mile, every rapid, lots and lots of me had run all of them. And this is what it looks like. And just to remind you, this is what it looked like when we were at Lee's Ferry. So it has not lost any of its buoyancy. You'll notice that the front end has gotten pretty bashed. It was pretty beat up, but otherwise it was as buoyant, as structurally intact, and as easy to move through the water as the day we launched it. So in terms of proving the concept that a Thule Reed raft could run the Grand Canyon sometime in the past, we think that kind of proved that it could. Now, just to point out, so now the next thing that we've started looking for are some of the stories that might be present. And the Hopi and the Navajo have river running legends, people going down the river.
Really?
So here's this legend of Tio that the Hopi have. Tio actually founded the Snake Clan. Notice down there on the right, this is part of one of the clans of the Hopis. But this legend of Tio, he actually used a hollow log and went all the way to the Sea of Cortez, is the legend. But you can see that this angry river with roaring rapids, multiple cascades, black rocks, and iron walls. That's the Grand Canyon right there. So, and then the other thing that I've sort of started looking for is any evidence, perhaps, in rock art. There's lots of rock art, pictographs and petroglyphs scattered throughout the Colorado River Basin. Again, as Tom mentioned before, Thule grows throughout the basin. The lower Colorado tribes we know had this technology for quite some time, and so it probably was traded in the middle Colorado and the upper Colorado River Basin to all of the groups, tribes that were up there, the people were up there. So, for example, that one on the right, now I'm starting to see, wavy lines is kind of a common motif in a lot of rock art, and I'm wondering if, maybe those are waves. I don't, that's the problem with rock art. You can read pretty much anything you want to in it. So here's another one. Actually, this is a paper that we found that does talk about, possibilities for boats in the desert. And all of these are from the Colorado River Basin. And then I just pulled that panel out. That one on the right there is actually Tio's boat, supposedly that square thing. And then you can see the canyon walls on both sides of it there. And then finally, there's a lot of interest, particularly among a lot of the California tribes. So as Tom mentioned, he keeps calling ours lots and lots a whisk broom. I think it's a pretty good boat myself. But yeah, when you start talking to some of the native boat builders, they get these gorgeous boats, upturned prows and sterns and, an actual cockpit for someone to sit in and so on. Although I have to say, I think they would be a little harder to turn over in the middle of the lava falls rapid. So,
absolutely, I think your design significantly improves upon this archaic display here. Okay, I think yours is going to work better in the rapids. Hey, I have a question for you. Someone asked, the river runs one direction. If back then the indigenous people, rafted down the river, is there any way they could get back to their community, get back to their tribe, get back to their village, or was it a one-way trip?
No, I think, this is the story of Tio, is that he floated down the river and then went overland back to his village, back to the Hopi area.
So for people that have never been to the Grand Canyon, there are ways once you exit the river to hike back up and work your way back up to your village, your tribe.
It would have been a slower trip than going down the river. But,
But it's possible. Okay.
It's certainly possible.
And we did have another question. Well, we have a lot of questions, but one through one of the sites. Randy asked, will the Thule Reed boat be going into the GCNP Historic Boat Collection?
Hey, Randy, it's good to hear from you. Good question. We offered it to Grand Canyon National Park's museum collection, and they reviewed it, and then they decided in the end not to take it. So the next person I called was Martin Stament, and Martin is the executive director of the Glen Canyon Conservancy. He runs the Powell Museum in Page, Arizona, and he was like, do you want me to be there in 1 hour or 2? And so lots of knots got swept up by Martin and were taken up to Page, Arizona. And they're working on a boat museum up there. And in theory, it's going to be on display there at one point.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you, Randy, for the question. Pete, I think I interrupted you. I think you were.
Well, and I just have 2 final slides here, Mitch, and it's just to thank the group. And again, a big part of the trip is having people that help each other, that are good natured, have incredible stories to tell. And we had the best. It was just an absolute wonderful group. And so,
and you brought
anyway.
a zebra. You brought a zebra with you too. It looks like,
and we have a zebra
or a leopard or something.
No,
a giraffe.
Giraffe.
Is that a giraffe? Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see the giraffe in that. It's my bad.
Every river trip needs a giraffe.
Well, it kind of had a short neck, really. But,
short neck giraffe. No, so, it really is the people. It's who you boat with. It's who you travel with. It's not the rapids. It's who you want to on day 26. Look out your tent and see and go, I'm so glad I'm here with them.
Yeah.
I hear you.
That really makes a difference.
I hear you. So, do you guys mind if, Pete, are there more slides? Because we got a bunch of questions. So
no, I'm going to go stop the screen. So we
okay, let me bring us all back up here. So look, people are asking. I'm paraphrasing from a couple of different questions. Can you guys hear me? Okay, because I'm getting feedback. Okay, so are you soaking wet at the end of the day? If it's that cold, how do you dry off? Are you drying your clothes by the fire? Is there some other technique that you're using? And how did the indigenous people back then stay warm, stay dry, and stay alive on these types of journeys? That's a great question.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. And so, first of all, I was wearing a dry suit. We have our, we've got our primitive Thule reed boat, but we've got a, personal flotation device. We've got dry suits. We've got long underwear, so no, I was pretty dry and warm all the time. Historically, though, that's a good question. And, one of the things that is that, so right now, Tom mentioned at the beginning is that, the Grand Canyon water is all coming out of the bottom of Lake Powell, the Glen Canyon Dam. And it's coming out at like 55 degrees, 40, 54 degrees, something like that. So it's always cold all year. Historically, it was, we had much greater fluctuation. In the summertime, it would probably get up to 70 and 80 degrees, Too thick to drink and too thin to plow was the same, in terms of, the unregulated river, the wild river.
So from your experiences, then, you guys think that it could have been accomplished back in the day?
I think so.
Especially in the summer, right?
Yeah, nobody probably was moving around too much in the wintertime anyway, except to maybe cross the river. And this is something I think, all over the basin, the rivers would have been barriers to travel. So, you make the Thule boat and cross the river, and yeah, you might get cold in the wintertime doing that, but you got a fire over there, your neighbor's got the fire, and warm up.
So we got a great question. Somebody was obviously paying attention. And Tom, you talked about the ruins that you guys would find being a couple miles or every couple of miles or something like that. Did anybody ever try to figure out if you launched a Thule boat and just tried to push straight across, if you would end up down the river at the point where you might find ruins? So people are actually diagonally, zigzagging their way down the river, and that's where you're finding the ruins.
It's a little further than that.
It's a little further. Okay.
But the concept, the simple concept of I'm on flat water, I see a rapid, I can pull over, I can scout it, I can look it over. If I know how to swim, and again, remember the Mojave and the Cocopah, these people were excellent swimmers. They had no life jackets. They knew how to fish. So the water was their highway. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to get out of our mindset of, oh, it looks cold, or how I could never do this. Yeah. To realize that, yes, it could have been done fairly easily if you knew how to swim and you knew how to fish, and you knew how to build a boat and you had a river. It's all there. Why wouldn't it have been done?
It makes sense. It makes sense to me as somebody looking from the outside in, and for someone like John Powell to unilaterally state, no one has ever done this before. It's all me, okay, which sounds like the American thing to say, as opposed to what really happened. Are you getting any pushback from historians? Is this creating new research? Is it creating a new view on the history of the canyon? To both of you, what's been your feedback, your thoughts so far?
Pete? Okay.
Oh,
sure. So far, the jury is still out. And basically, we proved concept. That's all we did. That's all we wanted to do. At the discussion we've just had is the same discussion the historians have just had. Yes, proof of concept. Why not? And actually, some of the there's a professor from the Arizona State University who's Hopi,
right.
and he was like, oh, of course they did this.
Wow.
So I'm with him. I'm of course they did. We just showed, again, first documented, but
I mean, and this is one thing. I mean, I kind of wish we had been able to get some of the tribal members, tribes involved in this beforehand. I mean, right now it's a couple old white guys who kind of did this, but I'm hoping it does start a conversation, to really, like I say, with rock art, with some of the legends and so on, that, as Tom says, proof of concept. Right now, the Thule Reed boat could make it through the Grand Canyon. Why couldn't it have ever done it historically in the 10,000 years before Powell?
And we know that it probably did happen. And I think you guys just showed the world that it could happen. And, a couple of questions. What's the next adventure? Will you be doing it again? What's in the future for the two of you when it comes to paving roads and new adventures? Do you have anything else you guys are planning on doing together?
A self-support Thule boat trip, Tom.
He's already thinking. I think you guys need a lawyer and a son to hook up with you guys and make this happen, right?
Yeah, we got to get you there.
Give us an excuse to get together one more time and include another adventure in our lifetime. Hey, I know you're both, interested in preserving, our natural preserves, our environment. Tom and Pete, maybe, just wrapping things up. What do we need to know about the canyon? What do we need to know about what's happening in your neck of the woods, Tom? And what can we do to help preserve this beautiful place on our planet?
This country is really lucky to have the National Park Service. It's the best agency I can think of. It's preserving these amazing places in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. And yet Grand Canyon National Park has no congressionally designated wilderness, not 1 acre. When you think of Grand Canyon, you think of cliffs and slopes and cliffs and slopes, and at the bottom, tiny little river down there. Not 1 acre of congressionally designated wilderness. What's wrong with this picture? I encourage anyone who's interested to write their senator, write their congressman, and say, hey, where is the Grand Canyon Wilderness Bill?
So what's the deal? Why hasn't that happened? You've done the research. You know the answer to the question. I mean, really, what's the reason?
This is money changers in the temple. And what did Jesus do? He threw them out. Money changers make money in the temple, and the commercialization of the park, certainly the river in the park, the concessionaires that operate in the park, they aren't wilderness happy. They don't like the word. They don't like the concept. Okay. So the pushback politically is large, and yet this is the people's park. We, the people, manage the national parks. If we don't care to get involved and pay attention and voice our concerns, then nothing happens. But I think this is a pretty low threshold to step over if enough people want it to happen.
So we've got to write and communicate with our elected representatives. We'll see how much good that does. But I think also, being a part of it, visiting it, seeing it, smelling it, experiencing what the canyon has to offer can change your life. And I still remember back in my high school days, my memories from hiking the canyon and doing some other things, Tom. And I think your dad, if I'm not mistaken, didn't your dad take you to the canyon when you were young? Wasn't he exploring the caves for sloth dung or something like that?
That's exactly right. But I always think that wilderness doesn't mean we have to go there. I support wilderness in Alaska. I've never been there.
Right.
I support wilderness wherever it is, even though I'll never go there. Bigger than 5,000 acres, no roads, no power lines. That's what wilderness is as a concept, and we need this now in the days of global warming. We need these ecological resources more than ever.
Biodiversity issues and all sorts of issues that the natural environment. That's the place where all of this stuff is happening.
So people want to know, how can they help? Are there any web links that they can research? They can make donations. Can they reach out to two of you? I mean, what's the best way for people to get involved based upon, what they've heard in this show, and to make it easy for them to learn about what you're talking about and to help any way that they can? What works for you guys?
Well, I certainly think about River Runners for Wilderness is certainly a project of the nonprofit Living Rivers, which I volunteer for. But there are a number of environmental organizations around the country. This is going to be a journey for many organizations to get involved with, not just one. But it really does start with writing your elected representative, and this is got to be a bipartisan journey. Grand Canyon is not a partisan place. It's a bipartisan place. I have many friends that do not vote the way I do, that care greatly about the Grand Canyon, and I do not want to lose them, and they don't want to lose the Grand Canyon either. So you don't necessarily need to go to any one organization, but you need to show your passion that protecting places like the Grand Canyon or the Statue of Liberty or Yellowstone or Yosemite, you got to write that letter and say, these places are important to me and I want them to be preserved as wilderness. Well, maybe not the Statue of Liberty, but certainly the other large national parks.
I love it. I love it. It's so important.
One organization I can just mention right off the bat is that I've found is really good is Grand Canyon Conservancy, and you can Google that one. And that's one of the things, Tom's mentioning these, issues. I mean, not just in the park itself, but there's been a lot of controversy about things going on just right outside the park. For example, in fact, Washington Post just had an article today on a big project on the Little Colorado River. They're trying to build these dams and reservoirs that then will be, it's these gravity-fed hydro projects and stuff like that. So during the day, they'll pump water up to the dam, and at night then let it out and create hydropower. And anyway, so and it's in a mostly wilderness area. It's actually on the Navajo Reservation to the east side of the Grand Canyon, but still it's in an area that's very sacred to the Hopi, to the Zuni, to the Navajo. So there's lots of issues. Again, there's an article in the Washington Post today about that. So the Grand Canyon Conservancy is sort of a clearinghouse for a lot of this stuff. If people want to look at that.
I think a lot of people who watch the show, who become interested, they need a place to start, right? So they can get up to speed on what the stories are, what's happening, what are the issues on both sides. And I encourage you guys, share this video. For those of you watching today's show and the recorded show, share this with family and friends that want to get involved. Reach out to the organizations that Tom and Pete have shared with you. If you guys have any questions, DM me and I'll put you in touch with Tom and Pete. And let's see what we can do to save the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon area, so that you and your family and future generations can enjoy the beauty and the wilderness that the canyon provides all of us. Hey, Tom and Pete, if viewers want to get in touch with you guys, whether Tom, it's for private rafting or just to get some questions answered, maybe to do an interview, Pete, you too, Tom, starting with you, what's the best way for people to reach out and get in touch with you?
If you search Tom Martin Grand Canyon on Google, my contact information will pop up right there. Don't hesitate. Call, email, send a letter. I'm always, encouraging people to outreach, and anything we can do to help, be honored to.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. How about you, Pete? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, in terms of mine, is probably not Google Peter Brown Grand Canyon, but Peter Brown Tree Ring.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a website by any chance, or are you guys going to make everybody Google you?
Most of my research is.
You guys are playing hard to get here.
My private company is Rocky Mountain Tree Ring Research, rmtrr.org. So.
Okay. Awesome. That's fantastic, because people will play it back and they'll write it down. And I have a feeling just from some of the comments and questions and thoughts, everybody really enjoyed the show, you guys. This was something different than what I normally do. And I think that it's touched the hearts of a lot of people. So for that, I appreciate you guys taking your time and coming on the show and sharing your adventure. It's an amazing trip. And I just feel bad that it's been, 4 decades from when we've actually seen each other, although Tom and I have chatted a couple times over the last 10 years. He was on one of my shows when his book came out. But here's what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to respect your time and attention, and we're going to let everyone out of here. We're going to wrap things up. If you guys have questions, if you can't get in touch with Tom or Pete, reach out to me. I'll see if I can help facilitate that. We have more shows coming down the pipe at Human.Social. You guys, I love doing this. It allows me to stay sane when I'm not in court trying cases. This is kind of fun to do, especially when you've got two old friends that you haven't seen in a long, long time, who you share a lot of good memories with. So for everyone watching, Tom and Pete, stay here for a second. Watching live, sit tight. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the journey. It's kind of crazy right now, but we're going to get through this upside down COVID-19 world. And when it's all said and done, try to make each day your masterpiece. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mitch.